Chapter 2. The Seal's Visit. Tulikki raised her hand in greeting and ran towards the waterline. Petri scanned the sea but saw nothing. Only when Tulikki began to wade boldly into the sea did he make out the familiar dark shapes of the great seals. Tulikki stopped when a bull in his prime approached her, moving her hands in the air, making shapes as though they were dancing, whilst the rest of her body hung disconsolate. The young bull nuzzled her feet and then rolled over. Tulikki climbed onto the soft white underbelly of the great seal. Petri stood up anxiously, longing to call her away, knowing she would not listen to him. It had always been that way. Tulikki had moved freely among the great seals since she was a tiny baby. Petri's gaze was distracted by the sight of an older seal cow arriving. She nosed Tulikki gently, and Tulikki responded by dancing her fingers over the cow's flank before curling back towards the bull. The bull nosed her back towards the cow as he turned over again. Tulikki sat in the shallows, watching the two great seals as they flicked their tails and moved their heads. Then the cow continued towards the shore, whilst Tulikki and the bull stayed in the shallows. Petri stood up and began to walk cautiously towards the cow. She recoiled and then moved backwards towards the sea, but then appeared to change her mind, taking a new route toward a lower part of the shore where the rocks were more jagged. Petri climbed laboriously, frequently stopping to check his footing. His glances back towards Tulikki and the bull became less frequent. His breathing became more pronounced. By the time he reached the top of the small ridge, his wife had begun to emerge from her sealskin. Rianda was transforming on a small rock on the far side of the gully, where she knew he could not cross. Petri knew he did not deserve her trust, and the familiar pricking of shame filled him. He found a place as close as he could to her and settled himself. He kept his eyes averted. Watching Rianda transform had always felt too intimate, and since she had returned to the sea, he'd felt it all the more. "Is everything ready for tomorrow?" Rianda asked. "They are preparing Tulikki's body now," Petri replied, raising his eyes to look at his wife. She kept her skin pulled up around her waist so that she looked more like a mermaid than a Selkie. She held it protectively. Her body signaled distrust, but her eyes showed compassion. "Marta came from the village to help Jill. Jill doesn't understand our ways, and she wouldn't know how to do it right." "Jill knew Tulikki better than anyone else. Let her grieve in her own way," Rianda replied, flicking her tail sharply against the rock. "Tulikki has stopped speaking completely. I have prepared Anna's old room for her. She will stay with that woman tonight, but after the funeral she will come with me. She should be with her kin. I have more than enough space for both of us." "Tulikki should stay with Jill. It's what her father wants," Rianda responded. "How is Nestori? Have you seen him recently? Will he come tomorrow? I miss him so. I miss you both." Rianda smiled sadly, shaking her head and looking across the foaming water in the gully that lay between her and Petri. She looked across at where Tulikki was lying beside the young bull. Then she looked back at her husband. "Yes, I saw him today. He will come. He will not leave the sea, but he will come. He loves Tulikki in his own way, just as Jill loves Tulikki in her way. He loved Tulikki enough to give her the child she craved, and he is mourning her now. He will be the one who will take the ashes to the sacred grove. But as long as you live, he will not walk on this island again as a man." Petri bowed his head. Familiar tears ran down his dark cheeks. Rianda took a deep breath, let it out slowly, and she looked across the shore to where Tulikki was sitting with the bull in the shallows. "You should learn her language." "What? Whose language?" Petri asked. "Jill's language," Rianda replied. "Jill's language? Why should I do that? She's lived here long enough, and she knows our language, even though she still speaks strangely. I expect she'll go back to her own kind before too long. When Tulikki moves in with me, she'll have nothing more to keep her here." "Tulikki must stay with Jill." There was nothing compassionate left in Rianda's voice. Petri looked up, startled by her tone, wiping the tears away frantically as he recognized the movements that began the transformation. He could never bear to look at his wife for the final few minutes she was still human. Just before her face transformed, he heard her parting words. If you hold on too tight, history will repeat itself. Rianda dived off the rock and swam around the spine of the rocks to where Tulikki and the bull were lying in the shadows. She nuzzled her granddaughter and then swam out to sea. The bull placed his muzzle on Tulikki's neck and then followed. Tulikki stood, wriggling her fingers for a few moments before she turned back to her grandfather on the sand. He patted her back, and they stood for a moment in an embrace before they set off walking towards the northern end of the grey in silence.